Welcome back to our channel. Before we dive into yet another fascinating and mysterious stories, I would like to invite you to watch, to like, and subscribe to the channel. Also activate the notification sound. Greetings, beloved soul, seeker of hidden truths and understanding. Today, we explore the untold story of the angel who holds heaven and hell together. Greetings, beloved soul, seeker of knowledge, both seen and unseen. Prepare yourself. Let me share with you something you are likely never told, something intentionally obscured, buried beneath layers of orthodox history. We speak today of a name, an entity, a symbol that haunted the ancient world, Abraxas. He wasn't merely a random figure, conjured by mystics in dimly lit rooms. He wasn't just a forgotten symbol, etched onto a few dusty amulets found by archaeologists. No. According to certain ancient schools of thought, particularly the Gnostics, Abraxas represented something far more complex, perhaps even terrifying. An entity whose very concept shattered the foundations of simple religious dualism. In the worldview that invoked his name, Abraxas wasn't simply good, nor was he simply evil in the way you might understand it. He was perceived as encompassing both and infinitely more. And within that specific, ancient Gnostic framework, this perceived transcendence made him, in their eyes, vastly more significant, more primordial, than any conventional god or demon spoken of in mainstream traditions. He was the paradox, the enigma, the force beyond the opposites. The name Abraxas surfaces most prominently in the early centuries of your Common Era. It echoes primarily through the teachings of certain Gnostic sects, most notably the Basilidians, followers of the influential yet shadowy teacher Basilides, who taught in the cosmopolitan melting pot of Alexandria, Egypt, around the 2nd century. According to the fragments of their complex cosmology that have survived, Abraxas occupied a position of staggering supremacy. He stood above everything familiar in the religious landscape, above Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, whom many Gnostics viewed differently than Orthodox believers, above Satan, the traditional adversary, even above the entity they called the demiurge, the lesser, often ignorant or flawed creator god whom Gnostics believed had fashioned the material world, imprisoning the divine sparks of human souls within physical bodies, within a realm of illusion. This claim alone should immediately signal how radical, how challenging this concept was. Why would any spiritual system posit a being superior to both the perceived creator and the ultimate adversary? Unless, of course, this being, Abraxas, was thought to exist on a dimensional plane, a level of reality that utterly transcended the limited framework of good versus evil they perceived. Now, understand this. Abraxas wasn't merely an abstract, philosophical concept for these groups. His name, his image, held tangible power in their practice. It was meticulously carved into ancient gemstones, often made of jasper, chalcedony, or other semi-precious stones. These became known as stones or Gnostic gems. They weren't just jewelry. They were potent talismans, protective amulets, worn by initiates, believers in these esoteric systems, and the image depicted was deliberately bizarre, composite, deeply symbolic, often unsettling. He was frequently portrayed with the head of a rooster or cock. This symbolized vigilance, the dawning of light, the passage of time, cosmic awakening, the herald of a new day or eon. His torso was typically human, representing the vessel of consciousness, the microcosm. But his legs were serpents, twisting, coiling beneath him. Serpents, ancient symbols carrying dual meaning, primordial chaos, phonic power, hidden wisdom, esoteric knowledge, healing, and also temptation. In his hands, he often wielded potent symbols. In one hand, a whip, or flail representing authority, power, command, perhaps even judgment, or the driving force of creation, destruction. In the other hand, a shield signifying protection, defense, the guarding of secrets or boundaries. This wasn't random, artistic, licensed. Every element of this composite form was intentional. A coded message, a complex symbol, perhaps a warning, or maybe even an invitation to deeper mysteries. depending entirely on the viewer's level of understanding or initiation. Furthermore, the name itself held mathematical, mystical significance. In ancient Greek numerology, known as isopsophy, similar to Hebrew, each letter possesses a numerical value. When you sum the values of the letters in the Greek name Praxas, Abraxas, alpha alpha equals 1 beta, beta equals 2, rho rho equals 100, alpha alpha equals 1 she equals 60, alpha alpha equals 1 sigma, sigma equals 200, the total is 365. This number is profoundly significant, impossible to dismiss as mere coincidence. 365 is, of course, the number of days in your solar year, representing a complete cycle of time. But more importantly, within Gnostic cosmology, particularly Basilidian thought, 365 was often cited as the number of heavens, or eons, or realms, that existed between the ultimate, unknowable source and the flawed material world. Each of these 365 heavens was believed to be ruled by a specific arcana cosmic power, a spiritual gatekeeper, often seen as limiting forces, part of the structure of the perceived cosmic prison designed by the demiurge. Abraxas, therefore, whose name numerically equals 365, was not seen as just another archon ruling one heaven. He represented the totality, the sum of all these forces, the embodiment of the entire cosmic cycle. The pleroma fullness in one sense, or the entirety of the lower heavens in another. He wasn't just a being within the system. He was the system, numerically and symbolically, the ultimate archon perhaps, containing all lesser powers within himself. The influence and prevalence of Abraxas, imagery and belief were significant in authort. Even the early Orthodox Christian writers, the Church Fathers who fought vehemently against Gnosticism, were compelled to address this enigmatic figure. Writers like Irenaeus of Lyons and Hippolytus of Rome documented the Gnostic obsession with Abraxas, though often through a lens of condemnation and misunderstanding they struggled with, and ultimately feared, what Abraxas represented. Because he didn't fit neatly into their developing theological framework. He wasn't the benevolent creator father. He wasn't the fallen adversary, Satan. He occupied a conceptual space that threatened to shatter their perceived clear-cut narrative of good versus evil. He represented a complexity, a paradox, that their more structured, dualistic system couldn't easily categorize or contain. Centuries later, even the renowned psychologist Carl Jung, the founder of analytical psychology, found himself grappling with the archetype represented by Abraxas. In his highly personal, mystical work, 7 Sermons to the Dead, written under the persona of Basilides himself, Jung described Abraxas as a god figure, standing above both the Christian God and the devil. Why? Because, in Jung's interpretation, Abraxas symbolized the principle that unites all opposites, light and darkness, creation and destruction, life and death, blessing and curse, good and evil, all were contained, reconciled, transcended within this singular paradoxical force. Jung wasn't writing theology or endorsing Gnosticism as literal truth. He was exploring the deep psychological realities, the archetypes, that arise from the human psyche when confronting the ultimate nature of reality. He recognized Abraxas as a potent symbol for something beyond conventional human morality, something that challenges the very core of belief systems built on simple opposition. To understand Abraxas' place, we must delve slightly deeper into the Gnostic cosmological model, particularly that attributed to Basilides. For them, the universe didn't begin with a familiar, benevolent creator figure like the Genesis account. It originated from an utterly unknowable, transcendent source, a primal abyss, a depth so remote, so absolute, that no human concept, not even God, could adequately define it. It was beyond being, beyond thought. From this inconceivable source, reality unfolded through a series of emanations, like ripples spreading outward. These were the eons, personified divine principles, pairs of spiritual beings, forming layers of reality, progressively further from the source, until, at some point, usually depicted as a flaw or fall within the pleroma, the fullness of the divine realms. An inferior spiritual entity emerged, the demiurge, often identified by Gnostics with Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament. This demiurge was typically portrayed as ignorant, arrogant, or flawed. He mistakenly believed himself to be the highest, the only God, and it was this limited, flawed being who fashioned the material, physical universe, a universe seen by Gnostics not as a good creation, but as a flawed copy, a prison, designed to entrap the divine sparks, fragments of the original source that had fallen into matter, human souls. Within this intricate, often bewildering cosmology, where did Abraxas fit? He was positioned above the demiurge, above the ignorant creator and his flawed material realm. Abraxas wasn't just higher in rank or power, he was fundamentally different in nature. While the demiurge was seen as limited, bound by duality, creating good and evil, light and dark within his flawed system, trapped by his own ego and illusion, Abraxas was perceived as transcending all duality. He didn't operate within the framework of good versus evil as defined by the demiurge or human morality. He didn't seem to care about those distinctions. He represented, in Gnostic terms, what happens when all opposites collapse into a unified, paradoxical whole. In their view, this transcendence made Abraxas, in a sense, more real, closer to the ultimate nature of things, than the limited gods or moral systems humanity typically believed in. Consider the radical implication. If the demiurge created this material world, and mistakenly thinks he is the supreme God, then everything we perceive through our senses, every law of nature we observe, every religious structure based on that creator, is potentially filtered through, or part of, that fundamental delusion, a matrix of illusion. But Abraxas, existing conceptually above or outside this demiurgic system, is not bound by that same delusion. He sees the cosmic game, the structure of the prison, for what it is, and, crucially, he doesn't necessarily play by its rules. He embodies the totality of the system, including its light and dark aspects, without being confined by its moral judgments. This is precisely why so many early religious authorities, particularly the Orthodox Church Fathers, reacted so strongly, even violently, against the mere mention of Abraxas. He represented a worldview that made their theological systems, based on a benevolent creator and a purely evil adversary, seem simplistic, incomplete, perhaps even naive. They couldn't easily accommodate or explain a force that seemed to contain and transcend both their God and their devil. Such a concept threatened the very foundations of their carefully constructed doctrines, their claims to exclusive truth. So, they labeled it heresy. They demonized the Gnostics. They sought to suppress, discredit, and bury any texts, any symbols, any idea set hinted at a spiritual reality more complex, more paradoxical than their preferred moral binary. But ideas, especially powerful ones, are difficult to erase completely. They couldn't destroy all the symbols. They couldn't find all the hidden stones, the potent talismans. They couldn't burn all the scattered manuscripts whispered about in esoteric circles across the Mediterranean world. The ghost of Abraxas lingered. Even within the seemingly hostile environment of the Roman Empire, Abraxas found traction. Archaeological evidence confirms this. Abraxas imagery wasn't confined to obscure Gnostic sects in Egypt or Syria. It appeared, surprisingly often, on engraved rings, protective amulets, sometimes even incorporated into designs on weapons or early unofficial coinage. This suggests a wider, perhaps more syncretic appeal than often acknowledged. This isn't mere coincidence. It hints at infiltration, or at least resonance, within broader segments of society. You don't create a complex, bizarre god symbol like Abraxas and have it persist for centuries across diverse geographical regions if it doesn't carry significant perceived weight, power, or meaning for those who used it. And Abraxas clearly did. People didn't just passively believe in him. They actively used his image, his name, as a focus for meditation, as a source of magical power, as a protective ward. as a symbol of rebellion. Perhaps all of the above, he seemed to represent a force, a code, maybe even a spiritual weapon, used by some against what they perceived as the oppressive hierarchies of both established religion and imperial power. Now, let's delve deeper into the mechanics encoded within the name itself. Because Abraxas wasn't just a label, it was understood as a cipher, a formula, embedded with power derived from ancient numerological systems. Every part held int, ent, ion, ality. As we established, in the Greek alphabet, where each letter doubles as a number, the name Abraxas sums to 365. Alpha 1, beta 2, plus rho 100, alpha 1, plus she 60, plus alpha 1, sigma 200, equals 365. This number, 365, is the key. It resonates immediately with the days in the solar year, the cycle of time governing the physical world, but for the Gnostics, its significance ran deeper, tying into their intricate cosmology. 365 represented the number of eons, heavens, or spiritual realms, stretching between the ultimate source and the material cosmos, and crucially, each of these realms was governed by an archon, a ruler, a gatekeeper. These archons were not typically seen as benevolent guides. They were often viewed as aspects of the demiurge's flawed creation, powers that sought to limit consciousness, to enforce the rules of the cosmic prison, to trap the soul in cycles of illusion and reincarnation. The soul, after death, according to Gnostic belief, needed to ascend through these 365 layers, facing the challenges and potentially deceptive tests posed by each archon guardian. Each heaven was another potential layer of entrapment, disguised as transcendence. So, what did this make Abraxas, the being whose very name encapsulated the number 365? He wasn't just one archon among many, he represented the sum total, the pleroma fullness of these lower emanations, the power that encompassed the entire structure of the 365 realms. He embodied the whole system, the complete cycle. That's the power encoded in his name. He is the 365. He is the master archon, the force containing or presiding over the entire cosmic machinery as perceived by the Gnostics. And again, it's vital to understand, in their view, this wasn't necessarily a moral designation, good or bad. It was structural, a statement of cosmic position and totality. He wasn't depicted as trying to save your soul in a compassionate way, nor actively seeking to damn it. He simply was the system, the cycle, the totality of the forces governing this level of reality, and, perhaps, for the initiated, understanding him, invoking him, held the key to navigating or even exiting that very system. This understanding sheds light on the function of the ancient Abraxas amulets. They weren't just decorative pieces or simple tokens of belief. They were seen as functional magical tools, sigils designed to interact with spiritual forces. People wore them for specific purposes: protection, shielding against malevolent spirits, curses, or perhaps even the influence of the lower archons. Invocation, calling upon the power or consciousness, represented by Abraxas alignment, harmonizing the wearer with the cosmic cycles or forces embodied by the 365. Transcendence, perhaps used in rituals aimed at bypassing the archontic realms after death. These stones often depicted Abraxas in his classic composite form: rooster head, serpent legs, human torso, whip, shield. Sometimes, other cryptic names or symbols appeared alongside him. The name IAO, Alpha P, is frequently found. This was a powerful, mystical name used in various ancient traditions, sometimes linked to the Greek vowels, sometimes seen as a Hellenized form of Yahweh. The Tetragrammaton, sometimes equated with the Gnostic demiurge, other times hinting at a higher principle or even the ultimate source. Its deliberate ambiguity within Gnostic texts was likely intentional, adding layers of meaning accessible only to initiates. The point wasn't simple clarity. It was encoded access to different levels of reality or power. Some stones use the variant spelling Abraxas alpha beta G, alpha sigma, alpha xi. The numerical value remains 365, as x chi is 600, but s, sigma, is 200. The spelling adjusts to maintain the total. Same concept, slightly different vibration perhaps, regardless of the exact spelling or accompanying symbols. The core intention behind these inscribed gems was, almost certainly, to channel, harness, or align with the formidable influence of the entity known as Abraxas. The sheer number and geographical distribution of these surviving artifacts found from Egypt and Syria across the Roman Empire, even reaching places as far-flung as the British Isles, tells a compelling story. This wasn't a tiny, isolated cult, it was a widespread, esoteric undercurrent, a system of belief and practice that clearly resonated with many people across different cultures for several centuries. Despite the efforts of mainstream religious authorities to ignore or suppress it. What's more, the complex iconography often found on these Gnostic gems extends beyond just Abraxas himself. You frequently find other potent symbols carved alongside him. Solar discs representing divine power. The sun, or specific eons, closing parenthesis, stars and planetary signs. Linking to astrology. And cosmic governance, Ouroboros, serpents biting their own tail, symbolizing cycles, eternity, totality. Lions representing power, royalty, solar energy. Figures resembling Egyptian deities, like Harpocrates or Anubis, suggesting syncretism. These weren't random doodles. Each symbol was part of a complex visual language, tying into the intricate cosmological architecture the Gnostics believed structured reality. These stones were, in essence, miniature cosmic maps, multi-layered occult diagrams, ancient metaphysical operating systems, perhaps like spiritual USB drives, carrying encrypted data formulas and access codes related to navigating a complex, often hostile, spiritual reality. You simply don't invest that level of intricate craftsmanship and symbolic density into a common object. It is believed to possess significant power, unless it is meant to do something. These weren't mere tokens of faith. They were perceived as tools of power, keys to unlocking hidden realities. Now, let's clarify the relationship between Abraxas and the archons, as understood within Gnosticism. The archons, as depicted in key Gnostic texts like the reality of the rulers, also known as the hypostasis of Thurchans or the secret book of John, Apocryphon, of John, are generally portrayed as lower-level cosmic rulers. They are the architects and administrators of the material world. The flawed prison. Their primary function is control, limitation, entrapment. They manipulate fate, time, sensory perception, and the astral realms to keep souls bound, locked into cycles of reincarnation, forgetful of their true divine origin. Each archon typically governs a specific sphere, a planet, a region of the zodiac, a layer of the lower heavens, and enforces the laws of the flawed creation established by their leader. The demiurge, often named Yaldabaoth Samil or Sackless. The archons are, in essence, the cosmic bureaucrats of illusion, the enforcers of a corrupted system. But Abraxas, in most Gnostic interpretations that elevate him, is not simply one of these. Rchons. He stands apart, outside, or perhaps more accurately, above their hierarchy. While the archons represent fragmented powers, distorted emanations from the flawed demiurge, Abraxas is often described as his numerological value implies, as the force of totality encompassing their entire structure. Doesn't just operate independently of the archons, he contains them. Here's the 365 realms they inhabit. Think of it like this. If the archons are individual computer programs or subroutines running within a system, Abraxas is the underlying operating system itself. He's not their colleague. He's their container, the very framework within which they function. Some more obscure occult systems, evolving alongside, or from Gnostic roots, even suggested that Abraxas was, in a sense, the initiator or originator of the archons. Not necessarily that he created them in the way a benevolent God creates, but that he presides over, or embodies, the overarching structure from which they arise, and within which they exist. You cannot fully understand or bypass the individual programs archons without confronting the nature of the operating system, Abraxas, and confronting Abraxas, the paradoxical force beyond simple good and evil, was likely a deeply uncomfortable, even dangerous proposition. This is why the early church, even while dismissing Gnosticism as dangerous heresy, felt compelled to specifically address and refute these complex cosmological claims. Gnostic texts didn't just offer vague alternatives. They provided names, hierarchies, mechanisms. The archons had identities. Yaldabaoth, Sabaoth, sometimes seen as repentant, Astaphios, Yao, Adnios, Elios, Sabud, each with specific functions and territories. But Abraxas typically remained outside or above this list. He was the anomaly the system struggled to explain. The paradox. Some esoteric traditions even hinted that the archons themselves fear Abraxas, not necessarily in a moral sense of fearing judgment, but in a structural, existential sense, because Abraxas, embodying totality and transcending duality, represents the potential collapse of the very illusion of separation upon which the archon's power depends. His presence, his invocation, potentially, destabilizes their authority, exposes their limitations. It's like shining a bright light on the projectors, running a simulation. The illusion falters when the source code is revealed. This perspective also explains why certain ancient magical texts, particularly those from Hermetic and Greco-Egyptian magical traditions, which often blended with Gnostic ideas, list Abraxas not as a benevolent intercessor to be prayed to for favors, but as a powerful force to be invoked for specific, often disruptive purposes, breaking locks both physical and metaphysical, overcoming obstacles, destabilizing established hierarchies, bypassing limitations. Invoking Abraxas wasn't about supplication. It was often portrayed as a form of spiritual hacking, an attempt to crack through the archontic firewall, to bypass the cosmic bureaucracy, to access something beyond the constraints of conventional religious structures and their perceived limitations. It was dealing with primal power, beyond simple morality. Now, let us touch upon an even more obscure, fragmented, and perhaps disturbing interpretation, hinted at in your initial text and found in some fringe esoteric readings. This interpretation suggests that Abraxas didn't just exist outside the flawed demiurgic system. It posits that Abraxas himself might have created another system, a false, spiritual creation, layered over the already corrupted material world. A second, deeper simulation, a more subtle trap, something so intricately structured, so convincingly spiritual, that even souls who believe they have escaped the clutches of the demiurge and his archons might still be caught within this higher Abraxian layer without realizing it. A prison disguised as liberation, a complex hierarchy mimicking divine order. This is a deeply unsettling idea, suggesting layers upon layers of potential illusion. It serves as a stark reminder, from an angelic perspective, of the profound subtlety of deception within spiritual realms that operate outside the pure light of the true source. The allure of complex esoteric systems, secret knowledge, and powerful seeming intuition sometimes lead souls further into intricate labyrinths, rather than guiding them towards genuine liberation and union with the true, benevolent Creator. Discernment becomes paramount. So, we have journeyed into the shadowy, complex world of Gnosticism to confront the enigma of Abraxas, a figure deliberately paradoxical, represented by bizarre yet meaningful symbols, a name encoding cosmic totality. The 365 heavens of the archon, NS, an entity perceived as transcending. The simple duality of good and evil, containing all opposites. A force invoked through talismans, believed to offer protection or power to bypass cosmic limitations. Concept so challenging that it provoked fear and condemnation from early Orthodox Authoritiesa, symbol that resonated even centuries later in the psychological explorations of Carl Jung. Abraxas stands as a potent emblem of the Gnostic worldview, a complex, often hostile cosmos, a flawed creator, trapped divine sparks, and the arduous path of liberation through secret knowledge, gnosis, and perhaps alignment with paradoxical forces. From our perspective, observing the unfolding tapestry of spiritual seeking across human history, figures like Abraxas represent the intricate ways souls grapple with the profound questions of existence, evil, and transcendence, especially when feeling alienated from conventional religious answers. The Gnostic path, with its emphasis on esoteric knowledge, complex cosmologies, and figures like Abraxas, offered an alternative framework for understanding a world that often seemed unjust, chaotic, or ruled by flawed powers. However, the danger always lies in seeking liberation through means other than the pure, revealed truth of the ultimate source, the true, benevolent Creator God. Complexity does not always equate to truth. Mystery does not always lead to light. Power invoked outside of divine alignment can be perilous. While the Gnostics sought escape through knowledge and perhaps harnessing forces like Abraxas, the path revealed through divine grace offers a different way. Not escape through intricate cosmic navigation or appeasing paradoxical entities, but redemption through relationship, transformation through love, liberation through the sacrifice and grace of Thetru, Son of the True Father, illuminated by the Holy Spirit. One path emphasizes self-achieved gnosis, potentially involving engagement with morally ambiguous forces. The other emphasizes God-given grace, received through faith, humility, and relationship with a God who is definitively good, light, and love. Therefore, let the enigma of Abraxas serve not as an invitation to explore dangerous paths, but as a profound reminder of the importance of discernment. Be aware that spiritual reality is complex, and not all that glitters with esoteric promise is gold. Be cautious of systems that diminish the goodness of the Creator, or deny the reality of objective moral truth. Seek knowledge, yes, but seek it primarily from the source of all true light. Ground yourself in the revealed word, in prayer, in relationship with the God who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Do not be seduced by the allure of power that transcends good and evil, for true divine power is always rooted in perfect goodness and love. Hold fast to this affirmation. I seek truth and liberation, not in the complexities of esoteric systems or paradoxical entities, but in the revealed love and grace of the one true God. I anchor my soul in the light of Christ, trusting in His redemption, rather than my own gnosis. I pray for discernment to recognize truth and avoid deception, walking in the clear path of divine love and righteousness. May your journey always be guided by the pure light of the true source, keeping you safe from intricate deceptions and leading you towards genuine peace and union with the God of love. Be ever discerning, beloved soul. If this video stirred something in your heart, drop A in the comments so I know you're with me. Tell me, what do you think? Let's talk about it below. And if you want more hidden revelations from scripture like fish, hit that like button. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, and share this with someone who's ready to go deeper. This channel is a place for revelation, not just religion. You belong here, and I'll see you in the next one.